What if everything you've been taught about aliens is wrong? What if the greatest secret isn't a threat, but a promise? For every story of terrifying greys and reptilians, there are countless others, whispered by contactees, hidden in ancient texts, of beings who see us not as subjects, but as family, beings of immense power and wisdom, who have chosen to guide us, to heal our world, and to help us awaken to who we truly are. They are the Arcturians, the Pleiadians, the Telosians, and more. They are the benevolent ones, and this is their story. Reports and stories have long insisted that not all extraterrestrial intelligences who have met or monitored humanity are hostile. Some appear indifferent, a few seem actively curious, even benevolent. There is no single, definitive neutral in the catalog of interstellar cultures. Motivations are complex, layered, and often inscrutable. But across centuries of testimony, folklore, and the modern patchwork of contact narratives, patterns emerge. Certain species appear again and again in positive roles: rescuers, teachers, guardians, or patient observers whose interest in us is not rooted in conquest, but in something closer to kinship. What follows is an expansive, humane account of 5 alien societies frequently described as friendly toward humankind: the Arcturians, the Tallosians, the Lyrans, the Alpha Centaurians, and the Pleiadians. My goal is not to present incontrovertible fact. Such a thing is impossible in any realm that straddles myth, testimony, and the fringes of science, but to render the stories with care, the small details, the personal impressions, the ways these beings are described to think and feel. We'll trace their origins, their cultures, the ways they are reported to have interacted with Earth, and the moral lessons their contact narratives suggest. Many people who have shared their experiences with these 5 species describe 2 recurring impressions. One is that these beings respect life. They intervene sparingly, nudging rather than coercing. The second is that they see humanity as nascent, not merely in technology, but in moral capacity, and they appear to believe we might yet become something larger than our present fractiousness. Whether this is projection on our part or an actual ethical stance of extraterrestrial cultures is impossible to prove. What we can examine is how these stories help us reimagine responsibility, both theirs and ours. 1. The Arcturians, keepers of balance, healers of worlds. The Arcturians are often described as among the galaxy's oldest intelligences, a civilization that has endured so long it has shaped habits of thought, diplomacy, and subtle intervention into a deep cultural ethic. In many accounts, they are not merely technically advanced. They have reconfigured their societies around the fundamental task of maintaining ecological and spiritual balance, both on their homeworlds and on worlds they consider part of a broader network of conscious life. Origins and cosmology. According to contact narratives, Arcturians evolved around a massive star in the constellation Boötes. Because of the star's properties and the maturity of the system, they developed, over deep spans of time, not only starfaring technologies, but also philosophies that placed harmony above conquest. Their cosmology frequently emphasizes cycles, energy moving through forms, intelligence expressed across substrates, and the importance of sustaining patterns rather than disrupting them. In some versions of the story, Arcturians transitioned into what contactees describe as a fifth-dimensional awareness, a consciousness that integrates spatial perception with temporal intuition. This doesn't mean they are supernatural. Rather, the Arcturians are said to have cultivated mental and social practices that allow them to operate on levels of causality and perception humans rarely experience. Their higher dimensions are described as practical realms of sensing, broader bandwidths of empathy, complex collective decision-making, and subtle fields of healing. Appearance and communication. Contact reports commonly describe Arcturians as small in stature, 3 to 5 feet in height, with large heads and almond black eyes, skin with greenish tones, and 3 slender, dexterous fingers on each hand. These physical features are often framed as an expression of cognitive sophistication. Large cranial capacity corresponds to long developmental periods, and fewer, more complex fingers allow for delicacy of manipulation. They communicate primarily via telepathy. Rather than the abrupt, image-poor telepathy of popular fiction, Arcturian communication is often described as layered and luminous, like a chorus of moods, precise images, and contextual memory all folded together. An Arcturian sentence, in human terms, might be a shared experiential field. You suddenly feel the texture of a concept. This is why many human contactees report the experience as intimate and profoundly transformative. Technology, healing, and the Black Knight. Arcturian technology is described as advanced in ways both familiar and strange. Their starships, often called living craft in reports, integrate materials, energy systems, and biofield interfaces. They move without the combustion and waste technologies humans know. Their propulsion and life support systems are often presented as resonant systems harmonized with electromagnetic and subtle fields of the surrounding space. Two artifacts often associated with Arcturians in these narratives are the starship Athena and the so-called Black Knight satellite. The Athena is described as a monitoring and protective vessel, arcing in hidden orbits around Earth at times of celestial danger. The Black Knight, a legendary dark object orbiting Earth for millennia in some stories, is attributed by some to Arcturian intervention, a sentinel observing the planet through ages. Whether these objects exist as physical reality, misidentifications, or mythic symbols is not the point for those who tell the stories. For them, the artifacts are markers of a long-term, watchful investment, an intelligence that has decided to keep a hand on Earth's throat, not to throttle, but to steady. Moral ethos and influence on humanity. Arcturians are often depicted as patient teachers. Where humans talk of fixing problems quickly, Arcturians seem to prefer structural healing, changing a river's course through restoration, not damming it, changing a city's illness by strengthening its social networks, rather than treating isolated symptoms. They are described as ecological engineers far more than exploiters, and many contact narratives credit them with subtle assistance. Technology seated in human myths, gentle steering of scientific ideas, and the removal or suppression of technologies too dangerous for societies not yet matured. Ultimately, those who describe Arcturian contact speak of reverence. There is something non-dogmatic about Arcturian wisdom, a refusal to dictate, and a willingness to remain behind the scenes, guiding by example and occasional intervention. The myths of the Arcturians. Long before Earth's first forests unfurled their leaves, the Arcturians tell of a time called the Great Shattering. Their star, immense and bright, had once been unstable. In their early history, when their species still depended on fragile biospheres, a cataclysm nearly ended them. Solar winds lashed their world, oceans boiled, and entire cities of glass and stone were torn into the upper atmosphere. Legend says that in those years, the Arcturians turned not to war or despair, but to the song. Each household, each community, raised its voice in harmonic chants. They believed that consciousness itself could stabilize the matter of their world. Whether the science behind this belief was sound or not, the practice unified them. Families sang at dawn and dusk. Entire cities vibrated in unison. Their myths say the star calmed, that the radiation softened when enough of them aligned their thoughts into patterns of balance. It was during this period that they claimed to have discovered mind over matter in earnest. The songs of shattering remain in their archives, taught to every child, reminding them that survival is not the triumph of machines, but the harmony of mind and cosmos. Contactees sometimes report hearing faint tones, like distant choirs in their dreams, after Arcturian encounters. Some suggest these are fragments of the ancient song, carried across light years as part of the Arcturians' enduring practice. Keep the star steady, keep the universe singing. 2. The Tallosians, the hidden architects beneath the mountain. The Tallosians belong to a different, quieter category of contact narrative. They are not interstellar travelers in the sensational sense. They are often described as denizens of Earth herself. Subterranean people whose civilizations developed beneath the surface and who have, for millennia, kept watch over human progress. Legends and meant Shasta. The Tallosian myth is deeply entwined with stories of ancient catastrophes. Atlantis and Lemuria, lost civilizations whose ruins, according to some narratives, sank into the sea or retreated underground. The Tallosians are often presented as survivors or descendants of those older peoples. Their great city of Telos, said to exist under Mount Shasta in California, is described as a crystal-lit citadel of halls, gardens, and transit tubes. Admiral Richard Byrd's diaries, themselves subject to debate and interpretation, are frequently invoked in Tallosian lore. Byrd's alleged encounters with subterranean civilizations during polar expeditions have inspired generations of seekers. Whether Byrd's accounts are literal records, metaphors, or misremembered dream states, they have become a touchstone, evidence that beneath the Americas, advanced cultures persist, societies that chose to withdraw but continue to observe. Society, technology, and an economy without money. Tallosian societies are described as highly organized, technologically refined, and socially oriented around collective well-being. In accounts from certain contactees, the Tallosians operate a no-money economy, distributing resources to meet needs through automation and careful stewardship. They are said to grow much of their food hydroponically beneath full-spectrum light, operated by autonomous systems. The infrastructure described, vitrified tunnels, electromagnetic tube transit reaching speeds far beyond human trains, creates an image of a civilization that solved energy, logistics, and social provisioning. Like the Arcturians, Tallosians are frequently credited with exceptional longevity and strong psychotronic abilities, not in order to dominate, but to conserve. Their ethics often pivot on preservation of knowledge, of species diversity, and of the fragile evolutionary arcs of surface life. Several contact narratives describe Tallosians as librarians of Earth's memory, keeping records of species, climates, and human cultures in repositories that dwarf our own archives. Contact and cultural exchange. Tallosian contact tends to be intimate and human scale. Rather than fleet approaches, encounters often occur through individual contact. A person suddenly finds themselves communicating with a Tallosian via dream speech, a mind bridge, or an invitation to an underground community. The stories emphasize relationships. Teachers, foster parents, companions who guide specific families or groups. The Tallosians' message, as relayed by those who claim contact, is often simple and urgent. Respect the planet, heal the wounds you have inflicted, and learn to live within limits. Their interventions, when they occur, can look like small corrections, the placement of an idea in human minds that later manifests as environmental policy, the restoration of a damaged wetland in a way that no one notices, but every creature benefits. There's an aura of melancholy in many Tallosian narratives, a sadness rooted in long memory. These are people who remember cycles of catastrophe and renewal, and who have little patience for hubris. But they also embody compassion, a willingness to shelter, compensate, and teach, rather than to punish. The myths of the Tallosians. The Tallosians root their origin myth in a catastrophe most humans know only as legend, the fall of Lemuria. According to their lore, when the seas rose and the mountains cracked, the high priests of Lemuria gathered at the sacred temples beneath what is now Mount Shasta. They carried with them a crystal flame, said to be a living spark gifted by celestial allies, a flame that burned without consuming, fed not by wood or oil, but by intention and prayer. When the waters swallowed the last Lemurian spires, a small remnant of priests, families, and scientists carried the flame into the deep caverns of Earth. There, they built the first halls of Telos. They swore a covenant. Never again would humanity forget the balance of earth, fire, water, and air. They vowed to wait until surface peoples matured, then return the flame as a gift. In their myths, the flame still burns in the Hall of Renewal, a subterranean chamber where Tallosian children are brought once in their lives to witness its light. Standing before it, they are said to remember the sorrows of their ancestors and the duty of guardianship. Admiral Byrd's accounts, if taken literally, describe seeing strange, radiant globes deep below. Tallosians insist those globes are reflections of the hidden flame, shimmering into the upper realms when humanity's actions disturb Earth's balance. Some say nuclear detonations in the 20th century awakened the flame's restless glow, drawing Tallosians back into limited contact with us. For them, their entire civilization is an act of remembrance. Live humbly, protect the planet, and carry the flame until it can be shared again. 3. The Lyrans, our first parents from the Ring Nebula. If the Telosians feel like keepers of earthly memory, the Lyrans claim the role of ancestral progenitors in many contact circles. They are often placed at the head of a long genealogical tree that includes some human lineages, a mythic firstness that recurs in the stories of several modern contactees. Migration and diaspora. The Lyran story, as told by those who believe in it, is that they originated around a star near the Ring Nebula in Lyra. Over deep prehistory, they migrated in large arcs, colonizing Hyades, Pleiades, and Vega systems. Their diaspora seeded what would become a network of related human-like cultures across the galaxy. But speed and technology did not shield them from the age-old problem of social fragmentation. According to many accounts, Lyran civilization fractured into rival factions and eventually fought devastating wars. These conflicts scattered their descendants and shaped the cosmological landscape. The Lyran's offspring became the Pleiadians. Some moved to the Vega system, others to the Hyades. Humans on Earth, in these narratives, are distant descendants of their genetic experiments or cultural seeds. Appearance, role, and the mythic past. Descriptions often present Lyrans as the classical Nordic archetype. Tall, fair, blue-eyed, with a dignity that is almost ceremonial. But what makes them compelling in these stories is not merely their looks, it is their role as historians and custodians of human origin myths. Many contact narratives describe Lyrans as patient chroniclers, beings who remember not only the facts of genetic engineering or migration, but the emotional story of why such things were done. This historical memory, in some tellings, leads the Lyrans to a stance of responsibility. They offer narratives, artifacts, and cultural forms that help humans recover senses of lineage and meaning. They do not impose a destiny, but they do care to tell the story in full. Lessons from fallibility. A crucial humanizing feature of the Lyrans in expanded accounts is their fallibility. They waged wars. Their technological brilliance did not spare them from political disaster. That fallibility is important because it undercuts any simple guardian angel image. Lyrans are presented as complex, creators and destroyers, teachers and perpetrators. Their presence in human myths may be less a comforting guarantee and more a mirror, advanced beings who share our capacity for both wisdom and ruin. The ethical lesson many contactees derive from the Lyran story is sobering. Intelligence alone does not guarantee moral progress. Societies, whether human or extra-human, must cultivate empathy and institutional practices that reduce the chances of catastrophic failure. The myths of the Lyrans. The oldest of the myths comes from Lyra. In their archives and in stories told by contactees, there is a saga called the War of the Twin Crowns. It is said that in the age before diaspora, the Lyrans were ruled not by governments, but by two great councils, one crowned in silver, the other in gold. The Council of Silver ruled the sciences, exploring the stars, mapping the elements, and discovering the secrets of energy. The Council of Gold ruled the spirit, keeping myths, songs, and ancestral laws alive. For thousands of years, the twin councils worked in balance. But imbalance grew. The Silver Crown coveted control, believing that material mastery alone could secure the species. They began building vast fleets and experimenting with genetics. The Gold Crown resisted, demanding harmony, warning that tampering with life would destroy the balance. War erupted. Stars saw fleets burn. Colonies were lost in fire. Entire Lyran libraries, said to hold records of 1,000,000 years of wisdom, were turned to ash in the Ring Nebula's winds. The myth says that, horrified by the devastation, fragments of both councils agreed to scatter. They left Lyra behind, traveling in massive space arcs to Hyades, Pleiades, and beyond. These survivors became our ancestors. Each colony carried only fragments of culture. Some took science, some song, some war, some peace. The Lyrans today, if they exist, claim to be historians because they fear forgetting the cost of the War of the Twin Crowns. Contactees describe them as solemn, often grieving, but also deeply compassionate. They want humanity to know this. Do not let division between knowledge and wisdom repeat our mistake. 4. The Alpha Centaurians, waterborne engineers and ocean guardians. The Alpha Centaurians occupy a striking niche in contact lore. They are often described as an aquatic species, evolved for life in deep water, but capable of building and sustaining complex cultures. In many narratives, they are the engineers of oceans, skilled in hydrodynamics, pressure systems, and the long-term management of planetary seas. Physiology and underwater bases. Alpha Centaurians are frequently depicted with gill-like structures, webbed hands and feet, and a physiology adapted to pressure and darkness. Yet they are not mere fish people. They are said to be highly intelligent, with language systems based on resonance and pattern, and technologies that blend material engineering with fluidic dynamics. Stories often place their bases on the floors of oceans and deep lakes, habitats that humans rarely survey, but that cover most of Earth's surface. These bases, supposed to exist beneath deep trenches and beneath continental shelves, are described as habitats of glass and composite shells, lit by controlled bioluminescence and powered by geothermal and tidal physics rather than fossil energy. USOs and mysteries of the deep. Unexplained submarine objects, USOs, are frequently tied to the Alpha Centaurians. Witness reports from naval personnel, fishermen, and divers sometimes describe luminous craft moving effortlessly through water, accelerating in ways that defy human propulsion. Whether these sightings represent alien craft, misinterpreted natural phenomena, or secretive human technology is a matter of debate, but within the contact narratives, the Centaurians' underwater presence explains why certain maritime anomalies persist. Those who claim contact often emphasize that Alpha Centaurians are more cautious in their overtures to humans. The ocean is both a literal and symbolic other for humanity. It is vast, poorly understood, and humbling. Alpha Centaurians, then, treat surface life with both curiosity and wariness. Their interventions, when they occur, are pragmatic, offering rescue to sinking vessels, providing counsel about oceanic stewardship, and sometimes sharing knowledge that helps humans build more sustainable coastal systems. Ethics of power. Alpha Centaurians are sometimes described as possessing the greatest technological might among the friendly species. The paradox, and the ethical heart of their stories, is that such power is tempered by responsibility. They allegedly learned, through long experiences, that brute force and unchecked manipulation of environments produce cascading damage. Their approach tends to be one of influence rather than imposition, helping humans build resilient fisheries, design seawalls that preserve tidal flows, or understand the subtle symbioses within coral networks. Contact narratives convey a humility in Centaurian philosophy. Complex systems require gentle, informed changes. When they act, they consider the totality of the ocean, its physics, its life, and its long-term cycles, rather than short-term human convenience. The myths of the Alpha Centaurians. The Alpha Centaurians tell a myth of their origins, not in stars, but in oceans. They claim that when their world was young, it was covered almost entirely in water. Land was rare, a scattering of volcanic islands. Their ancestors were deep dwellers, navigating trenches and caverns lit by bioluminescent creatures. The myth says the first Centaurian king was not a ruler at all, but a listener. They tell of a being called Shalom, who sat at the bottom of the deepest trench and listened to the voices of the ocean for 100 years. He returned with knowledge. The ocean itself was conscious, and it whispered of balance. From that day, Centaurians swore the covenant of the deep: never build a machine, never alter a current, without first listening to the ocean. Their science grew around resonance, tidal energy, and symbiosis with marine life. When they finally built starships, they did so using principles of fluid motion, their vessels gliding through space as if through liquid. They believe Earth's oceans, too, are conscious. Many contact stories from sailors and divers describe feeling watched by the sea after a Centaurian encounter, as if the species had awakened the waters to notice us. Some even claim that tsunamis or storms occasionally steer away from coastal towns after Centaurian rituals. Whether literal or not, the myth teaches a lesson. Those who forget the sea's voice are doomed to drown in it. 5. The Pleiadians, sailors of the cluster and active allies. The Pleiadians are perhaps the most prominent helper figures in modern contact literature. They are often described as humanoid, blonde, and radiant, appearing in countless accounts as messengers, teachers, and sometimes stern admonishers. They are credited with early warnings about other alien species, notably the Greys in many narratives, and with a persistent missionary zeal to awaken human ethical capacities. Origins and cultural traits. Emerging from the Pleiades cluster, 7 sisters whose light has fed human myths for millennia, Pleiadians are frequently presented as cultural cousins to the Lyrans. Their peoples share linguistic, aesthetic, and moral strands, but Pleiadians are distinctive in their directness. Many contactees report face-to-face meetings, extended dialogues, and hands-on training modules meant to introduce new methods of healing, energy use, and social organization. Their cosmology tends to emphasize interdependence and personal responsibility. Pleiadian teachers, as described by those they contact, do not insist on obedience. They offer tools, meditative practices, energy exercises, technological schematics, and trust that humans will decide whether to adopt them. This trust sometimes frustrates contactees who would prefer more obvious guidance, but it is part of the Pleiadian ethos, empowerment rather than submission. Semjasian, the voice of concern. One of the most famous Pleiadian contacts in modern lore is Semjase, who communicated with the Swiss contactee Billy Meyer. Semjase's messages, whether accepted as literal transmissions or as fusions of dream and internal insight, carry a tone of urgent compassion. She is often quoted warning against human hubris, environmental destruction, the careless use of atomic power, and the commodification of life. Yet Semjase, like many described Pleiadian figures, refuses to play the role of savior. She stresses autonomy. People must choose to change, even when help is offered. Conflict with the Greys. Pleiadian accounts often include conflict narratives. In many versions, the Pleiadians oppose the actions of the Grey aliens, a species often depicted as highly technological but morally deficient in their treatment of other beings. This conflict is cast not simply as warfare between species, but as a defense of ethical values. Pleiadians intervene to prevent abductions, genetic manipulation, or exploitative experimentation. The warfare is subtle: blockades of knowledge, rescue missions, and occasional skirmishes. But the moral stakes feel high in these stories. To many contactees, Pleiadians are guardians not only of human life, but of human dignity. The myths of the Pleiadians. Perhaps the most poetic myth is the Pleiadian journey of the 7 sisters. Humans, too, tell stories of 7 sisters pursued across the sky, but the Pleiadians' version is richer, woven with themes of migration, exile, and guidance. They say that once there were 7 great mothers, priestesses who led their people from Lyra after the War of the Twin Crowns. Each carried a book of light, histories, technologies, and songs encoded in crystalline tablets. They sailed across the void in sky arcs, each sister guiding her followers to a different star of the Pleiades cluster. But one sister, named Taygeta, wept. She feared her people would forget Earth, the young world they had once visited, so she vowed to return. The myth claims she placed a seed of her light into early humanity, a memory that would one day awaken when the stars were right. Every culture that gazes at the Pleiades and sees sisters, daughters, or guides, the Pleiadians say, is fulfilling that vow. They see in Earth's myths a mirror of their own, proof that the bond between their people and ours is ancient and ongoing. Contactees often describe Pleiadians as fiercely protective, yet they always remind humans of Semjase's words. "We are not your guardians, we are your kin. You must rise by your own will." For them, the journey of the 7 sisters is not just about stars. It is about remembering that exile is survivable, that families can scatter but remain bound, and that humanity, too, is part of a story written in light. Stories from the edge, personal encounters, and quiet transformations. To render these species humane is to bring forward the personal, the coffee-drunk scientist who woke with a memory of Arcturian hands easing pain from a neighbor's child, the grandmother who dreamt of Tallosian gardens and woke with the impulse to restore her town's polluted creek, the fisherman who watched an Alpha Centaurian craft lift a drowned seal and return it to the tide. These anecdotes share a common structure, an encounter that is small in spectacle but large in effect. Contact rarely comes as afflux of cinematic events for these 5 species. More often, contact feels like the placement of a seed. A thought takes root. An invention appears in a scientist's notebook. A community suddenly remembers an older, kinder way to steward the land. Take, for instance, a recently told story of a research diver in a coastal town. He described a pale, webbed hand resting lightly on his shoulder as he floated near a reef. He did not see the face. It was enough that he felt an intelligence there, curious, patient. Months later, he found himself working with marine biologists to restore seagrass beds, a project that revived fishing in the region and changed how the town viewed its relationship to the sea. The Arcturian or Centaurian presence in the story is less a supernatural rescue than a pivot, a small push toward a more ecologically attuned future. Other stories emphasize teaching. One contactee, who asked for anonymity in telling her story, described waking from a dream in which Tallosian archivists unfolded living maps of species declines. The images burned into her memory and guided a career in conservation policy. Years later, she discovered the policy frameworks she championed matched descriptions she had once seen in that dream. She credits a Tallosian nudge. Whether we call the nudge external or internal, the effect was real, toward an ethics of common care. Whether any of these species are real in the empirical, verifiable sense is not the central point for those who live by the narratives. The deeper value arises in what these stories teach us about care, humility, and the responsible use of power. The Arcturians remind us that ancient survival can yield a philosophy of balance. The Tallosians remind us that memory and conservation must accompany progress. The Lyrans warn us of the moral perils of technical mastery without empathy. The Alpha Centaurians show the obligation that comes with oceanic and technological might. The Pleiadians model empowerment and resistance against exploiters. If we treat these narratives as ethical parables, then they become instruments for cultivating a wiser species. They push us toward asking better questions. How do we steward the commons? How do we teach the next generations to regard complexity as sacred? How do we balance knowledge with restraint? In imagining extraterrestrials as friends rather than overlords, we rehearse how to be friends to one another and to the planet. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Check out more videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.